Welcome to another creepy story, where reality and the unknown blur together. Tonight we dive into a tale that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. But beware, once you start, there's no turning back. If you enjoy spine-chilling stories like this, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. That way, you'll never miss a terrifying story. Have a creepy experience of your own, drop it in the comments, and it might just become the next story, with your name featured. Now, let's get started. I have been a nurse in the emergency department long enough to know that fear has its own sound. It's not always the screams, or the alarms, or the rushing footsteps when trauma rolls through. Sometimes it's quieter, a change in someone's breathing, the tremor in a voice that swears it's fine when it isn't. Fear lingers in the corners of our clinging to the walls, settling into the chairs in the waiting room. I've worked codes, held dying hands, and seen things I still can't put into words. But there are a few nights that sit heavier than the rest, nights when I wonder if fear doesn't just come from the living. It was a Thursday though, and the ER days blur until you only remember the shifts that left scars. We were on surge, the waiting room overflowing with flu cases, broken bones, chest pain. My assignment was bed 9, tucked in the far corner of the department. The old rooms back there had been part of the hospital since the 1960s. Everyone joked they were haunted, but in a place like this, dark humor is survival. Bed 9 was occupied by a woman in her early 80s. She'd come in with abdominal pain, stable vitals, alert and oriented. Her daughter stayed at the bedside, clutching her hand like a lifeline. I'd checked on them twice that evening. Vitals steady, 4 fluids running, nothing unusual. But when I stepped in the third time, the daughter looked pale, unsettled. She whispered, "She keeps asking who the man is." I thought she meant a hallucination, maybe the onset of delirium. It happens often in elderly patients, but when I asked the patient, she turned her eyes on me, calm, clear, and said, "The tall man in the corner, don't you see him?" I forced a smile, noted it in the chart, and carried on. That's what you do, you document, you monitor, you reassure. But when I turned to hang a new 4 bag, I swear I felt the air shift, heavy, like someone had stepped closer behind me. I didn't look. In the ER you learn not to. Hours passed, and bed 9 went quiet. The patient drifted into an easy sleep. Her daughter dozed in the chair beside her. I was catching up on charting at the nurse's station when one of my co-workers, a seasoned trauma nurse, nudged me. "You see that?" she asked, nodding toward the hallway camera feed. For a moment, the grainy black and white monitor showed a figure moving past bed 9's doorway. Tall, thin, draped in something that looked like a long coat. My first thought was security, but no one was on the list, and no one should have been in that hallway at all. I went back to check. The room was the same, daughter asleep, patient breathing slow and steady. But the 4 pump was alarming. Not for air, not for occlusion, but unplugged. The cord lay coiled neatly on the floor. I hadn't touched it, neither had the daughter. The night dragged on. Around 3 a.m. the daughter woke screaming. I sprinted to bed 9, finding her pressed against the wall. He was standing over her. She gasped. Her mother lay still, monitors flatlining, code blue. We rushed in, compressions, epinephrine, the endless cycle that sometimes brings life back. But this time it didn't. Time of death, 3:17 a.m. I've lost patients before, but what chilled me was the daughter's voice afterward. She kept repeating, "He was waiting for her. He was right here." Security pulled the camera footage for chart review. At 3:15 a.m., 2 minutes before the code, the hallway feed froze for exactly 11 seconds. No error message, no reboot, just static. The next week, bed 9 was filled again. Different patient, middle-aged man, chest pain, stable. No delirium, no medications that might cause hallucinations. Around 2 a.m., I checked on him, and he whispered, "When is he leaving?" I asked who. He pointed to the same corner his predecessor had, empty space. Since then, I've noticed a pattern. Not every patient, not every night, but sometimes, just before someone crashes, they'll glance past me, pupils wide, as if watching someone else walk in. They don't scream, they don't panic. They just follow something with their eyes until the monitor tells us what we already know. I don't talk about this with my co-workers often. In the ER, you can't let superstition slow your hands. But the ones who've been here long enough, they know. You see it in the way they avoid bed 9 when they can. In the way they mutter about the grey coat man like he's part of the staff. I've been a nurse long enough to know medicine has answers for most things. Hallucinations, hypoxia, medication effects, sleep deprivation, they explain a lot. But they don't explain cameras freezing. They don't explain unplugged for pumps. And they don't explain how sometimes, in the quiet moments before a code, I catch the reflection of a figure in the darkened monitor screen, standing just behind me, waiting. And every time I hear a flat line in bed 9, I wonder if he was already there, long before I noticed. I've worked in the ER long enough to know that nights have their own rhythm. The days are chaos, family members crowding the halls, phones ringing, overhead pages every 5 minutes. But nights are different. The waiting room thins out, the lights seem dimmer, and the silence between alarms feels heavier. It's in those hours when exhaustion makes the walls hum and shadows stretch across the linoleum floors that you see things you can't chart, can't explain, and can't forget. It was a night shift in late October, the kind where the air outside feels damp and cold, and every patient seems to bring the season in with them. Bed 14 was my assignment, a trauma room on the far end of the ER. It's bigger than the others, meant for codes and resuscitations, and when it's empty, it feels like a cavern. I've never liked walking past it when the lights are off. Around 1 a.m. we got a call from EMS. A rollover accident, driver unconscious but breathing, middle-aged man, no ID on scene. They were 5 minutes out. We prepped the room, airway cart at the head of the bed, crash cart unlocked, suction tested, fluids spiked and ready. I stood at the bedside, gloves tugged tight, trying to ignore how cold the room felt. When the paramedics rolled in, the patient looked worse than I expected. Pale lips blue, blood matting his hair. He groaned once as we moved him, then went limp, vitals dropping fast. We started the drill for access, oxygen trauma survey. The doctor barked orders. I was at his side when the monitor flatlined. Code blue. We jumped in. Compressions, epinephrine, rhythm checks. The team moved like a machine, but the room felt wrong. The overhead lights flickered. The monitor beeped unevenly, and every time I leaned down to bag the patient, I swore I heard something. Not a voice exactly, more like a low hum just beneath the alarms. At first I thought it was the vent, or maybe blood in his airway, but the sound wasn't coming from him. It was coming from the corner of the room. The patient's pulse came back briefly. The monitor blipped into sinus rhythm, weak but present. Relief rippled through the team, but then his eyes opened. Not wide, not panicked, just open, and locked directly on me. They were glazed, unfocused, but the way they fixed on me made my skin crawl. He mouthed something, no air, no sound, just lips moving slowly. I leaned closer, thinking maybe it was a name, but what I read was one word. Behind, I froze. My hands went still on the ambu bag, and for the first time that night, I couldn't breathe. The room was loud with orders and footsteps, but all I could hear was the hum in the corner. Louder now, almost a vibration under my skin. I didn't turn, I couldn't. The next second, the monitor flatlined again. We worked for another 20 minutes, but he never came back. Time of death. 1:42 a.m. We cleaned the body, zipped the bag, and wheeled him to the holding area. The room went quiet. Too quiet. I stayed behind to reset, wiping down the bed, folding linens, alone. That was my mistake. As I bent to plug the monitor back in, I caught the reflection in the black screen. A shape, tall and narrow, standing in the far corner where the hum had been. No features, no face, just a dark outline against darker shadows. My whole body seized. When I turned, the corner was empty. I finished quickly, hands shaking, and pulled the curtain shut as I left. At the nurse's station, my charge nurse glanced at me. "You're white as a sheet. You're good." I nodded, but my throat felt like sandpaper. Before I could answer, she frowned at the trauma board. "Weird, bed 14's monitor is alarming. No patient was in there, no wires connected, no power running, but on the central screen, the rhythm strip for bed 14 showed a flat line, steady and unbroken. We silenced it 3 times, rebooted the system, but the flat line kept reappearing. It stayed until dawn when the next shift arrived. Then, just like that, it vanished. Since that night, I don't linger in bed 14. The other nurses joke about it, call it the ghost bed. Swap stories about strange shadows and freezing drafts, but they don't know about the word the patient mouthed to me. Behind, I still hear it, in the hum of the vents, in the silence before the next trauma rolls through. I've been in the ER long enough to know how death looks, how it sounds, how it smells. But I've also been here long enough to know that sometimes death doesn't leave right away. Sometimes it waits, and sometimes it stands right behind you. I've been an ER nurse long enough to know the human body has limits, but what unsettles me most are the moments when something crosses those limits. When you see or hear things that medicine can't file away in a chart. Nights are the worst for it. The corridors get too quiet. The hum of machines starts to feel like whispers, and shadows seem to gather in the corners, waiting for you to notice them. It was a winter night, snow still clinging to people's coats as they rushed into triage. We'd been slammed with flu cases, chest pain, slip and fall injuries. I was running on my 5th cup of coffee when they brought in a young man, maybe early 20s. He'd been found on the side of the road after a single car accident. Car was wrecked, but he wasn't bleeding much. Just cuts on his face, a dislocated shoulder, some bruising. He was conscious, calm, too calm. I remember asking him his name, and he gave it. Clear voice, steady eye contact. But then he said something that made me stop cold. He whispered, "I shouldn't be here. I already saw the man in the hall." I asked what he meant, thinking maybe a passerby had stopped to help him. He shook his head. "Not a man like you. He was waiting. He followed me here." Delirium, I told myself. Concussion, shock. I charted it and moved on. But later, when I walked him down the hall for imaging, he gripped my arms so tight I could feel his nails. His eyes locked on the far end of the corridor. Empty. Nothing but flickering fluorescent lights. Still, he kept whispering, "Don't let him take me." By the time we brought him back, he was pale and restless, vitals dropping. Trauma team assembled, fluids running wide open. His lips kept moving, but no sound came out. I leaned close, thinking he was asking for pain meds. Instead, I heard a rasped, "He's here." Right then, the monitor alarmed heart rate plummeting. We called a code. Compressions, meds, shocks. I pressed the ambu bag to his face, pumping rhythmically, sweat running into my eyes. But in the glass of the monitor screen, just over my shoulder, I swear I saw something. A shape, tall, thin, standing in the doorway, just outside the circle of light. The patient coded again, flatline this time. We worked him for 20 minutes, but there was no rhythm to save. Time of death, 2:14 a.m. When I stepped back, my arms were heavy, legs weak. The room felt like ice. One of the techs muttered, "God, it feels like someone walked over my grave." I didn't say what I'd seen in the reflection. Hours later, when I finally had a break, I went into the empty trauma bay to reset. I was gathering linens when I noticed footprints on the floor. Not bloody, not muddy, just faint outlines, like bare feet pressed into condensation. They led from the doorway straight to the bed and stopped. I called housekeeping, thinking maybe it was a spill, but by the time they came, the marks were gone. No trace, no explanation. I never told the family what their son had said. That's not the kind of thing you document. But the way he looked at that empty hallway, I can't shake it, because this isn't the first time I've heard it. Other patients, at the edge of coding, have whispered about the man in the hall. Some describe him in a grey coat. Others just say tall, watching, waiting, always waiting. I've been in the ER long enough to know medicine explains a lot: hallucinations, oxygen deprivation, brain misfires, but medicine doesn't explain why so many patients describe the same figure. It doesn't explain the reflections, the footprints, the cold weight in the room right before a flatline. I still walk those halls every night, but I don't look too hard into the shadows anymore, because I'm afraid one day I'll see him standing there. And if I do, I don't think he'll be looking at the patient. I think he'll be looking at me. I've been an ER nurse long enough to know the difference between stress and fear. Stress is routine, here the endless charting, the alarms, the short tempers when we're drowning in patients. But fear, real fear, is different. It's quiet, and it hangs in the air like static. We don't talk about it much, but sometimes, on the night shift, everyone in the department feels it at once. It was a double shift in late spring. We were short-staffed as always, and bed 22 had just been cleaned after a psych admit was transferred upstairs. The room was at the very end of the hallway, one of the newer additions to the ER, but somehow it felt older than the rest. The lighting always seemed dimmer, the walls colder. Nobody liked assignments back there, though nobody said why. Around midnight, EMS brought us a woman in her late 30s, car accident. She was awake, talking, but her pupils were blown, her speech scattered, possible head trauma. I led them into bed 22, clipped her to the monitor, and started her 4. She grabbed my wrist suddenly and whispered, "Please don't put me here. He's already in the room." I tried to calm her, thinking confusion from the concussion. "There's nobody here but us," I said. But her eyes were fixed on the far corner, wide, terrified. He was waiting when they wheeled me in, she insisted. Tall, in the shadows. He smiled at me. I documented it, reassured her, and kept working. But when I bent to adjust her fore, I felt it too, that pull, like someone standing too close, breathing just over my shoulder. My skin prickled, but I forced myself not to look. She was scheduled for CT. I wheeled her down the hallway myself, and when we passed the empty trauma rooms, she whispered, "He's following." I glanced back at the stretch of empty hall, the harsh fluorescent glow on polished floors. Nothing. Still, I pushed the gurney faster. By 2 a.m. she was back in bed 22. Scan clear, just mild swelling, nothing surgical. She should have been safe, but she wouldn't sleep. Every time I checked on her, she was staring at the corner, whispering under her breath. The tech asked what she was saying, and I leaned closer. Over and over, in a hoarse voice, she repeated, "Don't smile at me. Don't smile at me." Then, just before 3 a.m., her vitals crashed. No warning, no pain, no seizure. The monitor screamed as her heart rate plummeted into nothing. Code blue. My team flooded the room, compressions, epinephrine, airway secured. We fought for her, sweat dripping, gloves slick. And then, in the middle of it, the overhead light flickered just once. Enough that every head turned. For half a second, the entire room was shadows. And in that flicker, I saw it, something tall standing in the corner, motionless, watching. When the light steadied, the corner was empty. The patient never came back. Time of death, 3:07 a.m. We cleaned the body, zipped the bag, wheeled her out. Nobody said a word. But as I stripped the bed, I noticed something scratched faintly into the side rail. Tiny letters, shaky, hurried. "He smiles." I stepped back so fast I nearly tripped. The tech saw it too. We looked at each other, pale, neither willing to speak. By morning, when housekeeping came through, the scratches were gone. The rail looked polished, brand new. That was months ago, but bed 22 hasn't changed. Patients still complain of someone standing in the corner. Some describe the smile. Nurses rotate assignments to avoid it. We don't document the complaints anymore. We just work, keep moving, keep our eyes down. But every so often, when I pass that room in the dark hours before dawn, I swear I see teeth glinting in the corner of my eye. A smile too wide, too patient, waiting for the next body we bring in. I've been an ER nurse long enough to know medicine explains almost everything. Concussions, hallucinations, oxygen deprivation, fear. But medicine doesn't explain the scratches that vanish, the lights that flicker only in that room, or the way my chest tightens every time I hear the flat line in bed 22. Because sometimes, the patients aren't hallucinating. Sometimes, we see him too. I've been an ER nurse long enough to know when a patient is lying. We get it all the time, people downplaying chest pain, denying drugs in their system, saying they're fine when they're not. But one night, I learned there are things a patient can tell you that sound impossible. And still, every instinct in your body knows they're telling the truth. It was the tail end of a brutal night shift. The kind where every bed is full, every monitor is alarming, and your legs ache from running. Around 4 a.m., just when we thought the rush had slowed, EMS rolled in a teenage boy, 17, car accident. He wasn't critical, just banged up cuts, bruises, a possible concussion. He was alert, oriented, even cracking nervous jokes with the paramedics. A lucky case, I thought. We put him in bed 11, the one across from the supply closet. It's a quiet corner, away from the noise. As I was starting his four, he suddenly went still, his eyes fixed on the open doorway, pupils wide. "Is that your friend?" he asked. I looked up. The hall was empty. The other nurse was down at triage. Nobody else in sight. "Who do you mean?" I asked, taping down the four. He swallowed hard. "The man, he's standing right there. He's dripping wet." I glanced again. Nothing, just white walls and fluorescent lights. I chalked it up to head trauma, made a note in the chart. But later, when I came back with meds, the boy was trembling. He said the man kept walking past the doorway, back and forth, like he was waiting for something. He swore the floor was wet where the man stepped. I checked. The linoleum was bone dry. Around 5 a.m. the boy started to doze. The monitor was steady, vitals strong. I stepped out to grab supplies, but just as I reached the closet, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of water dripping, slow, heavy, like shoes squelching across the floor. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. When I turned back, bed 11's monitor flatlined. I ran. The boy's lips were blue, chest still, code blue. My team poured in, compressions, ambu bag, meds. His body jolted under the shocks. but his heart refused to come back. We fought for half an hour before the doctor finally called it. 17 years old, healthy, talking minutes earlier, gone. As we cleaned the room, I pulled the curtain closed. My hands shook as I gathered supplies. That's when I noticed the floor beneath the bed. Not wet exactly, but darker. A faint outline of footprints, leading from the door to the bedside. Housekeeping swore the floor was dry when they cleaned. The charge nurse told me stress was making me see things, but when I bent to wipe down the rails, I caught my reflection in the monitor screen. Behind me, just for a second, was a shape. Tall, shoulders slumped. Water dripping from hair that wasn't mine. I spun around. Nothing. That was months ago, but bed 11 hasn't felt the same since. Patients complain of cold drafts, of smelling damp concrete. Some swear they hear water dripping when the room is quiet. We joke about it at the nurse's station, call him the wet man, but nobody laughs for long, because I've been in the ER long enough to know when a patient is delirious, and when they're telling the truth. That boy wasn't imagining things, and when I walk past bed 11 at night, I don't look at the floor anymore, because if I see footprints leading to the bed, I know what comes next, and if I ever see them leading away, I don't want to know where they end. Thank you all for joining me on these journeys. Your support means everything, and I love reading your reactions and personal experiences in the comments. If these stories kept you on the edge of your seat or gave you chills, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more haunting stories. Have you ever experienced something similar, or perhaps you have your own unexplainable story to share? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Each of your stories adds another layer to our growing community of horror enthusiasts, and if you think someone else might enjoy a good scare, don't forget to share this video with them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories. And remember, sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that could happen to any of us. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, if you dare.